It's World Diabetes Day, and the theme for this year's observation is the family and diabetes. It's a day set aside to raise awareness of the impact that diabetes has on the family and support network of those affected.
Yeah, it is also a day to help promote the role of the family in the management, care, prevention and education of diabetes or around diabetes. TVC's Kemi Balogun tells us more on this report.
More than 425 million people are currently living with diabetes globally. Most of the cases are type 2 diabetes, which is largely preventable. Dr. Gregoria tells us a little bit more about this disease.
Diabetes is basically a condition where there is an abnormality in the body's ability to process sugar or circulating sugar working around the body. So this can present at various points in someone's life. It can present in early childhood or much later on as adults. The more common types tend to present much later on in sort of adolescent and also up in adulthood. There are two main types. You have type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes or early onset diabetes tend to be diagnosed much earlier in life.
This year's theme talks about the key role family support plays in addressing the modified risk factors for type 2 diabetes, which can be reduced through regular physical activity, a healthy balanced diet, and the promotion of healthy living environments.
The type of foods that we eat today can contribute in a lot of ways to instance developing diabetes. We have a lot more processed foods containing a lot more sugars, artificial sugars, which can sometimes have an impact in the way in the long-term use in the body. If we look back maybe to our grandparents or before that generation, they spent a lot of time working in the fields, walking everywhere. There was not as much inconveniences. But in today's society, where we have a lot more conveniences, life is a lot easier in a sense. We find that the everyday person, in terms of exercise and other activities that would help, is much less.
The International Diabetes Federation says that 1 in 2 persons currently living with diabetes remain undiagnosed. All families are potentially affected by diabetes, and so awareness of signs, symptoms, and risk factors for all types of diabetes are vital to help detect it early. Kemi Balogun, TVC News, Abuja.
Joining us now is an endocrinologist, Dr. Ramide Adeduro. Good morning and thank you for finding time to come.
Good morning, sir.
It's nice to have you join us.
So they say Sub-Saharan Africa has the fastest growing rate of diabetes,
Yes.
with Nigeria having a prevalence rate between 3 to 5%. Help us understand what causes this. We've been told that our consumption of sugar has increased dramatically over the years. Is that the reason, really?
Yes. And let me come to that prevalence that you gave. In the ideal setting, really, we've discovered that that prevalence is actually higher than what we're given by IDF. Because just because we don't have figures in Nigeria, we're going with that. But we know that the prevalence is actually higher than 3 to 5%. And again, if you look at it, we have imported the westernized way of eating. So our sugar intake has increased, really. So it's basically that, and our lifestyle changes. We have stopped exercising. If you look at it, in the olden days, our parents go to the farm. Are you getting that point? The children as well follow them to the farm. So it's like the exercise is much. But now, it's a sedentary lifestyle, especially with the computer now. Children don't play anymore. They sit with the computer, and then you find our children obese. One of our professors did a study at Abuja, and she actually discovered that majority of these children had diabetes. They were not detected, So they were newly diagnosed diabetic children,
So you're saying we're consuming sugar and we're not exercising
and we're not
enough to break it
exercising
down.
enough to break it down. Exactly.
Okay. So does it mean now that diabetes is basically a disease of food? Can we conclude that it's just food, the way food is taken and the kind of food that leads to diabetes?
The kind of food is not as if we can just conclude that that is it, you know, because you could have some problems, some other problems that could affect your pancreas, and your pancreas is not producing enough insulin, you know. But the food is like adding to it, you know. The kind of food is adding to it, it's putting a stress on the pancreas that is already having a problem. You know, you could have some autoimmune conditions that will affect the pancreas, and the pancreas is not producing enough insulin. You know, you could have some other secondary causes of diabetes. In other words, patients on steroids therapy, you know, like that, affecting the pancreas, and the pancreas is not producing insulin. But basically with the type 2 and in our own environment, we've discovered that our food intake has a high prevalence, you know, in causing diabetes.
All right,
So
to
it's a
the
lifestyle.
average person, sometimes the kind of on our streets, the person we see as having diabetes sometimes is the one who is big. When you're big, it feels like, okay, this one should have diabetes, as the case may be. But studies have shown that is not the case.
That's not the case.
People can look as slim as they can be, but they could have diabetes. But
Yes.
talk to us about the regular symptoms of diabetes, early symptoms and regular symptoms.
The regular symptoms of diabetes, they have what we call polyuria. You know, they pass a lot of urine, right? They drink a lot of water, and they have weight loss. Usually that's the regular symptoms that they present with. Now, for example, there's a program we had at General Hospital Ikorodu that they just brought in. General Hospital Ikorodu was used as a platform to start with on how to monitor these patients. We discovered a particular patient, he's just hypertensive, but during the screening, we discovered he had diabetes because his blood sugar was well over 300, his random blood sugar. Now, when I asked him these questions, were you having the symptoms? He was having it, but he kept it to himself. He was having polyuria, he was having polydipsia, he was taking so much water, and he was having weight loss. Those are the regular symptoms that we see, you know, with patients with diabetes.
So this year's observation is about diabetes and the family. And I'm just concerned about what level of sugar intake is recommended and how we can bring the family on with this. Because these days with children all around, you just want to feed them with as many sugar as possible. And you said earlier that there are even children who have been diagnosed to have diabetes.
Now, as we heard earlier on, we have two types of diabetes. You have the type 1 and the type 2. The type 1 diabetes, which is commoner with the children, is autoimmune, in which case the pancreas is almost totally destroyed, in which they don't produce insulin at all. Now, majority of these children, you know, need insulin, right? They have diabetes because their pancreas is not producing. For such children, then, of course, we have to monitor their sugar intake. But then because they're children, they still need sugar for activity. You know, we have pediatric endocrinologists, so they are basically specialized in handling the children, right? But now again, we have another type in which we have not mentioned, you know, in which you have diabetes, we call it maturity onset diabetes of the young. You know, you find these ones too, they are there, they're obese, you know, so they now present like the adult form of diabetes.
I see.
They present like the adult form, they're very rare.
Okay.
Very, very rare. Very rare. But now, when we have children at home, especially when they have a family history of diabetes, runs in the family, their father is diabetic, their mother, their grandparents are diabetic. And then you now start inputting so much sugar in these children, and yet they live a sedentary lifestyle. That child has a higher tendency of developing diabetes early in life.
So it's likely for one to inherit diabetes
Yes.
or high blood pressure from the parents.
Yes.
Wow.
Like, for example, I was doing a round yesterday, and someone called my attention that her friend lost the mom, you know, this time from a stroke, from hypertension. She was just 67 years old. And I asked her, She said the mother was a known hypertensive, but was not properly controlled and was not taking her drugs regularly. Well, I comforted her and all that, but I had to explain to her, and I had to go further to tell her that she and her siblings should make sure that they check their blood pressure, because the mother had essential hypertension, which could run in families. So they now have to take care of themselves by watching their lifestyle, you know, having a lifestyle change. The same thing happens in diabetes. Monitor their blood pressure, because they could develop the BP at any time. So it's better we catch it early before they start coming down with complications.
I'm concerned about how exactly we can measure the level of sugar intake, because in this day and time where everyone takes soft drinks with every meal,
Ice cream.
there just seem to be
Cakes.
in fact, the richer you become, the sweeter your life should get.
That's a problem.
But then how do we measure these in our diet? Is there a level? How can we begin to read danger signs that, oh, you're taking too much? Or should we just stop abruptly, which perhaps is impossible?
We need sugar in our bodies. We need sugar for activities. Now, we say this is an adage we teach our diabetic patients. In the morning, you eat like a king. In the afternoon, you eat like a prince. At night, you eat like a giver. Now, when we take in meals, because we are active during the day, our level of sugar increases, right? Now, we should try as much as possible to avoid taking these refined products. Are you getting my point? Refined products, just as we said, these ice creams and all that, all these are fast foods, meat pies and all that, you know, they are very dangerous. They're like poison to our bodies. We should learn to take in more of fruits and vegetables, you know, white meat, you know, that helps us better, right? Now, when you eat, you prevent yourself eating late at night, and you take more of fruits and vegetables.
Break it down for us. When
Yes.
you say white meat, which is white meat, which is red meat?
Fish.
Which is, okay.
Chicken. And
That's
when you
white
take
meat.
chicken to prevent yourself from adding so much cholesterol, you remove the skin, you know, so it helps you better, you know. And then at night, when you eat, I don't know how we can cope in Lagos, really. I don't know.
Is it just even in Lagos?
I don't know. But
Because the average Nigerian, especially for the evening, or in fact outside of Lagos, in the villages, they prefer to take something like pounded yam or something.
But their activity is much higher.
In the rural areas.
Yes, in the
Yeah,
rural
physically,
areas.
exactly.
Yes. Their physical activity is much higher.
That's true.
You know, because there was a conference I went for in Cameroon. So someone had to break it down and looked at it at the rate at which diabetes is increasing. When you look at it in the olden days, they didn't have much, but you look at the activity was very high. But now it's not so. It's not so. You know, so we eat late at night and we eat heavy meals and we sleep.
There also
You know.
seem to be a high burden of people who are not diagnosed. So they're diabetic, but
That's
they
where
don't know they
that's
are.
the problem.
For instance, I know of a man who has this wound on his leg for a couple of days. And then people were wondering, how come this wound hasn't dried up? Until he went to the hospital,
Yes.
you know, to verify what was wrong with him. How does someone know, you know, that perhaps it's diabetic?
That is why it is important, this screening, going for checkups. Because some don't come down with the florid symptoms of polyuria. They don't come down with everything just like that, you know. So most times it's the complications we see on the at the onset. Now, there was a patient I saw. It was a colleague that sent him. Unfortunately, he had a family history, but he never went to check his blood sugar until he came down with the renal complications. Right from my office, he went straight for dialysis by the time that he did his renal functions. So the same way, you have a patient with a chronic ulcer, you know, if he goes to the right place, it now depends on where he goes to. If he goes to the right place and he sees a doctor, of course they will check his blood sugar first to make sure it's not as a result of diabetes. Because we have a lot of amputees, you know, because of these complications of diabetes.
You're saying it can be treated with early detection?
Yes, we can manage it. Yes.
So the management has to do with watching your kind of food intake, your diet, and also
you
doing
have
exercise?
the non-pharmacological, yes, then that's the non-pharmacological aspect
All right.
in which you don't have to use drugs.
Okay.
You know, your diet, your exercise is very, very important.
Okay.
You know, alcohol intake, smoking, and all that, in order to prevent worsening of the diabetes.
All right,
before we
just
now talk
finally,
about drugs.
in just a minute, a day like this, how do you commemorate a day like this?
Yes, we're going to screen in all hospitals. I'm sure they're doing. In my hospital, we're screening. Like I said, we had a program yesterday in which we're just starting it with General Hospital Corridor. I'm sure they're going to spread it around. They call them MDoc. Okay. I was quite excited when I heard about this program, in which it helps us with monitoring the patients. Because sometimes you catch these patients and then you wonder what happens next. Do they actually go to the hospital? So with MDoc now, we're able to follow up these patients, you know, because they remind them about going to check their blood sugar. So it's like everyone with a smartphone, even if they don't have a smartphone, they use the SMS to remind them, go check your blood sugar, go check your blood pressure, you know. So I'm quite excited with that new thing. We're starting with General Hospital Corridor. I'm sure they're going to move around the other general hospitals in Lagos.
Dr. Aramide
Yes, sir.
Adediran, thank you for sharing your thoughts with us this morning.
Thank you very much.
Mike, I feel like I should just take water and fruits throughout today in commemoration of
Go
the
ahead, go
blood
ahead.
diabetes.
I know Dr. Aramide
Very
Adediran will like that.
I would like that so much.
All right, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much.